Alrighty, so I made a Q&A post and I'm here to answer some of your questions. Unfortunately, I can't get to all of them. At most, I can probably do about half because looking at it right now, I have over 100 and that is a lot. So I'm sorry that I couldn't get to every single question, but for those who aren't addressed in this video, just know that I will read this entire comment section. And if you aren't featured in this video, I'll simply come back later on my spare time and reply to your comments in the post itself. Also, I had plenty of repeat questions and questions that were kind of phrased in a different way, but they simply meant the same thing. So for questions like that, I may simply do something in post editing where I'll put similar comments on the screen at the same time. So I'll read one and any similar comments will be in view. So definitely pay attention to the screen. And also I probably won't be calling out names for these comments as well because I don't like botching people's names. So yeah. Alright, so let's not waste any more time. I'm going to be reading these from my phone, and here's the first question. Do you like the Battle Network Star Force series? If so, any plans on making challenge runs of any of those gaming series? I made a video about Battle Network whenever the collection was announced, so I'll probably put that in a card or maybe just put it at the end of the video. So I've already addressed something like that there, but as far as Star Force goes, I don't have an opinion about that because I've never played either of them. What is your favorite of the secondary antagonists from the Mega Man games? That is, the bosses that aren't a part of the main 8 you can choose from, but instead of the special bosses that either show up in those levels or have levels that appear after completing a certain amount of the game. That's a good question. I will say, just for shits and giggles, Double, because he's just such a big fat meme. But as a more serious answer, I will go with Kraft. Simply because Kraft was just such a great secondary antagonist towards Zero because they both were like war machines, essentially. So seeing them both go at odds and with different ideals, that was just a pretty cool dynamic, I'd say. Hey Magnus, I really liked the Anniversary Collection video. Thanks for that. And I was wondering if you would maybe cover the Legacy collections in a similar manner in a sort of a retrospective on the Mega Man collections. Well, it does sound like an interesting idea, but I feel like my bias towards the Anniversary collection may not give the Legacy collections a good enough faith review. And I'm also not a reviewer. That was just sort of a one-off test that I did just to see how that type of content would do. So yeah, I would need some more experience under my belt with reviewing before I could tackle that. Maybe that'll be another challenge I can set aside for myself, but only time will tell with that. Here's a weird question apparently. What is it like for you to do a casual playthrough off camera of a game you did a challenge run of? Are the motions engraved in your mind to where you still do similar strats, or do you try something new every time to see what new stuff you can do for fun? Good question. Short answer is, yeah, after I do a run, some of those strategies are like pretty engraved in my mind, especially for intricate strategies that I spent hours upon hours, even days on, because I practiced those maneuvers so much that they're just really just embedded in me at that point. But casually, I really just try to stray away from being a big try-hard, because if I'm playing the game casually, that means I'm just trying to be laid back and not thinking too hard. So really my casual gameplay is like night and day compared to my actual high effort gameplay that I put on the channel. So you may see me taking no damage in my challenge runs and all of that, but casually I take take a lot of hits and maybe even some deaths here and there just because I'm just being careless and I really just don't care. I mean, I'm not in front of a camera or anything at that point, so there's no real need to try hard. My question. I teleported bread. Bro, what? Man, what you mean bread, man? It's just an empty box of Krispy Kreme donuts, you goddamn fraud. What would you say is your personal favorite console out of all that you have played? Also, aside from Mega Man, what are some of your favorite game franchises you played over the years? Would you ever consider covering them as well on the channel? Well, firstly, the second part of that question is actually the same as several other questions in the post, so this will kind of knock that out, like all of them out at once. But I'll get to that part after the first part of your question, which I'm I honestly can't give a straight answer to that because I grew up from the NES era and Genesis and PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2, all of that. Those are like some of the golden years of gaming for me. So it's really hard to pinpoint which of those that I would consider my favorite, because a lot of those games like just defined me as a gamer. But the Sega Genesis was the very first console that I ever owned, so like just on a purely nostalgic note, I would probably go for that, because so many of my favorites were on that console generation. Like, for example, how I always flash this off recently, Shining Force. I love that series to death, and as you can see in the background, I actually have like a clone console of a Genesis sitting right here, and I've been recently replaying some of my old Genesis games, and also kind of buying some cartridges of old games that I no longer have, because I have some local game shops that sell them at a pretty decent price, like much lower than what you would find online. So I consider myself very lucky there. I've recently been replaying Kid Chameleon because I loved that game as a child, and I deluded myself into thinking that I beat that game before, but there's no way in hell Kid me beat Kid Chameleon when adult me struggles with it. I mean, I've gotten really far, but I don't know, maybe that's just a topic for another video. As far as the second part of the question goes, I absolutely adore miniseries, so it'll be a tall order to list them all, but just to list some favorites off the top of my head, like I mentioned in the first part of the question, I love Shining Force, as well as Fire Emblem. I'm pretty big into strategy RPGs. I love Devil May Cry. I'll get to that in a bit because there's a question about that coming up soon. I used to be very big into the Tales series, but not so much. I've kind of burnt out on that. I absolutely love Streets of Rage. Yeah, I'd be here all day just listing some, but yeah, that should give you a general idea of what I enjoy in games. Next question. What are your top 3 Mega Man games, and what happened to that Devil May Cry project you announced a while back? Top 3 Mega Man games off the top of my head would be Mega Man Zero 3, Mega Man X4, and a tie between Mega Man 8 and Mega Man 7. And an honorable mention to Mega Man 6 and 4. As for the Devil May Cry project, well, honestly, and this may sound a bit shallow, but I dropped it because it just didn't do that well view-wise. Now, see, you can technically say the same thing for my Mega Man and Chill videos because those don't get a lot of views either, but the difference between that is that Mega Man and Chill, I feel like that despite the low views, those videos actually have like a pretty great, I wouldn't say great, that sounds a bit pretentious. They seem to have more value because they're more authentic and they're mostly me talking from the heart and usually about subjects I care deeply about and people can relate to those, and it also doesn't really take a lot of my time to make those. Whereas, for an example, that Sigma comparison against the Savior statue from Devil May Cry 4, that video I made, I put quite a lot of work into that, and to have like no sort of substantial returns on that labor, it basically just kind of deterred me from making that project a reality like fully, because that first video I made was just to test the waters. So yeah, I typically do big tests like that. Like I said, my recent anniversary collection video and the Complete Works one, those were tests just to see how those videos would do and how receptive they would be to new audiences in the algorithm, and those did pretty well. So it's stuff like that that helps me consider what type of new content to branch out to, and the analytics simply just did not show that most of my audience were on board with the Devil May Cry stuff, but perhaps in the future I may revisit it whenever I have bigger ideas with it. Hey Magnus, first, thank you for making these videos. You're so talented. I don't know about that part. Second, will you make a tier list based on how you love each character? I'm really interested in hearing your opinions about the Mega Man characters. That's an interesting question, and I simply have to say that would be its own video. And that's something to consider. I mean, I can use that as another test just to see how that type of content will do. So yeah, I'll just keep it in mind and we'll go from there. Do you prefer playing new stages that are unfamiliar with or going through old ones that you know well? Well, that would assume that we would get more new Mega Man games. But to answer the question, I do enjoy running stages that I'm more familiar with because that means I can explore different ways of tackling it, or like how to efficiently beat it faster or more technically, stuff like that. Hey Magnus, I know you focus most on gameplay aspects, but what is your favorite Mega Man plot-wise? Oh, that's an easy one. Mega Man Zero. Mainly because it's one of the only series that really just dives deep into its lore, its characters. It's much more fleshed out compared to something like the X series, and classic series is all bubbly and happy, so there's not really a lot of depth there. X series has depth, but it just has a hard time actually presenting it properly to the player. Meanwhile, Zero series just has better storytelling. The characterization is much better. Characters like Harpuya and Ciel and quite a few others go through some pretty good development. There's so much material to dive in outside of the game. They really put their heart into that story. And a lot of the storytelling aspects in the story beats, like in the first game especially, just flies over a lot of people's heads. Especially when you take notice of like subtle parts of the story. But that could be its own video. I could gush all day about Mega Man Zero's story. That and having a different antagonist for each game just really kept the story fresh instead of just repeating this Sigma and Dr. Wily thing over and over again. As a fellow Mega Man fan, I suppose I am curious, where would you want the Mega Man series to go from where it is? As in, what would you want next and what would you expect from it? My only other question would be whether or not you play Mega Man ROM hacks. I personally love Mega Man Unlimited and Day in the Limelight and have been keeping up with X Corrupted. Well, first part of your question, I just want them to finally get 3D right. Because, I mean, the Legend series, I'll get to that in a bit because I had a question about that as well. It did really well too, but as far as like integrating actual classic or X style gameplay into 3D, you already know how X7 turned out. But if they actually went back and refined that, they can just as easily just emulate something like Devil May Cry, their own IP. Like Zero himself is like the perfect opportunity to put Dante in Mega Man. And X can be like a gunslinger type thing. I mean, the possibilities are endless. I mean, and like I said, it's their own IP, so it's not like they're going to be stealing or anything. I would love a Mega Man X game, for an example, that's like heavily inspired by Devil May Cry. And if the series just kind of picked up from there, I'm pretty sure it would be really popular. Okay, so chiming in mid-editing here because apparently I just did not answer that question about my thoughts on the Legend series. And considering that I was going to go back and answer all the questions that I did not cover in this video, I felt like that would have been unfair to the person who asked that question, since I literally just brought it up that I was going to read it. So yeah, I'm going to do that right now. So Peachblink says, what are your thoughts on the Mega Man Legend series in general? They are the only series in the whole franchise to go for a 3D gameplay style. Nobody counts X7, let's be honest. Fair enough. And as a result, they have their own weird quirks to them. So honestly, I'm a pretty big fan of the Legends series. I grew up with Legends 1 and 2 on the PlayStation 1 way back in my elementary school days. So God, you know that I have some history with those games. And despite the quirks and flaws it has, it was a really great take on 3D. And Capcom really dropped the ball with that, especially with Legends 3, but everybody knows that story. Because they could have gone so much further with 3D with Mega Man. And for the example that I'm going to present in this question before this, Legends could have just been a staple for 3D Mega Man gameplay if they kept it going. But I have plenty of thoughts on that, and that could be its own video. So if you guys are interested, I can do something like that, going over my history with the Legends series, how I really feel about it and stuff like that. But if this video gets 500 likes, I'll consider doing that. But for now, let me just get back to the other question because I apologize for this abrupt cut in for basically my screw up. As for your second question, yeah, I do play ROM hacks from time to time, maybe not like religiously, and I've also done a few ROM hack videos here and there on the channel. Like for an example, I did that Speed Bomber video like a few months ago, and I also did a few videos of the Rockman X4 boost mode, stuff like that. So yeah, I do enjoy them. Two questions. One, what is your favorite thing to do that isn't video game related? Two, do you have a family, like wife and kids, or do you ever see yourself settling down in the future? I love reading and writing. The latter is a big passion of mine. I'm always working on improving my craft, and I enjoy writing little short stories here and there, and I'm working on a novel. So, another editing note. For some reason, I left out two more hobbies. That'd be working out and meditating. Now, despite the strenuous effort of the former, and it's primarily for fitness, it still relaxes me and takes my mind off things and all of that. And the same goes for meditation, though that one's obvious because that's exactly what it's for. As for your second question, If I had a wife, I would drive her insane. But no, I'm single. Happily single, and I wouldn't mind having a family someday, but only whenever I get my shit together and I set out to improve myself and be able to provide for a family, because a lot of mistakes that people make these days is that they rush into parenthood. Like, there are people younger than me, because I'm 30, and there's people like in their early 20s popping out babies left and right, and I'm like, you're practically still a baby yourself. You haven't even lived life yet. So I want to make good progress as a man and be able to sustain myself first, and then I'll be ready to take on the responsibility of a family, because once I have a family, I'm going to take care of them, and I want to make sure their needs are met, and I want them to have a better childhood than I had, and that would require me to have everything together, at least together and by my standards. But yeah, I definitely wouldn't mind having a wife and kids someday. Just the problem is finding a woman who will actually tolerate me. Hey Magnus, do you play any musical instruments? If not, are there any in particular you'd like to learn? I used to play trumpet in high school. I mean, I wasn't a part of the high school band or anything, but I was pretty decent at it. I just didn't go anywhere with it because I didn't have any sort of particular passion in playing any instruments. But yeah. Now, I technically already answered this question in the beginning of the video, but the second part of it is actually pretty interesting. So it says, has any game has touched you based on its story, and if so, what game was that? Well, I do love me some storytelling, some good storytelling in games, and it'll be difficult to pinpoint just one game because there are plenty, and I'm pretty sure if I had some more time I could think of some better examples because I've played a lot of good games. But just off the top of my head right now, Tales of the Abyss was such a marvelous story. I love that game. It was a JRPG for the PS2, and it's really underrated and overlooked because games like Tales of Symphonia and Tales of the Abyss are like always hogging the spotlight because Abyss just hits so many good notes. It covers some good themes like change and all of that type of stuff. It really hits home well. And then 2 Fire Emblem games, Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn, I really loved those games. The storytelling was amazing. I love those games, and it was just symbolic for a time in Fire Emblem where it held some integrity for its story, because I don't let this be a secret to anyone. I'm not a big fan of how modern Fire Emblem writes its stories and its characters and all of that. With the exception of 3 Houses, that was a pretty good return to form. But otherwise, I'm not a big fan of the modern Fire Emblem Awakening and beyond. I didn't really care too much for those stories and those characters, even though some of them were pretty good. I don't know if you'd be interested in answering this. Well, I picked it, so I'm definitely interested. But what got you into the Tales series of games back when you used to do challenge runs of those? Well, I was already into Tales before I started making videos of them, but what really inspired me to do those was because at the time, the challenge running scene over in the Tales community, at least on the side of it in the YouTube sphere, that was looking to be pretty interesting at the time. There were a lot of active people in the community doing solo runs and stuff, and I just thought to myself, like, man, I really want to do one of those myself. Until then one turned into a few, and I also had like a bunch of unfinished projects and stuff. And that was mainly because at that point I was losing passion for it, and I really just wanted to get back to stuff like Mega Man that I had much more passion and desire to do. So yeah, it was really just that time where it was just a fun thing to do, and I was really into Tales at the time. Like, Tales was like my everything at one point. Like, I was so absorbed into that series, but not so much these days. I did love Tales of the Arise, though. It was a pretty good game. But it was also like the prologue to what this channel is today, because without dabbling into the Tales series and doing challenge runs for those, I probably wouldn't have even had much of a desire to do it for the Mega Man games or anything else like on my separate channel with the Fire Emblem content. So yeah. I was wondering if you've played either of the 2 Mega Man Battle Network side-scrollers, and if you had any thoughts on either of them. I know Network Transmission on the GameCube doesn't have the best reputation, but it holds a lot of nostalgic memories for me. Well, I definitely didn't play the Wonder Swan version. I think that's what that one was. I don't even remember the name of it, but I definitely played Network Transmission, and I don't even give a damn what anyone says. That game rocked. I loved it. Like, I played the hell out of that game on the GameCube. Like, that was like one of my favorite summer pastimes when I first got it. And I remember searching high and low for that thing at GameStop back then because it had some years on it at the time. and it was a used game at that point, and so I kind of had my money's worth there, but it was still a pretty good game. It had its issues, sure, and the battle chip system may have been poorly implemented, but seeing like the Battle Network series just kind of go back to the classic Mega Man roots on the side like that was pretty neat to see, and it definitely holds a lot of nostalgic value for me, because I love the Battle Network series. What's the future of your Model PX run? Did you come up with a definitive solution for the final stage, or stay tuned for the end of the video, I'll address that. Next question. Which would interest you more, a complete remake of the Mega Man Zero series with even more advanced graphics and mechanics, or a Mega Man X9 to finally fill that hole between the X and Zero series? Definitely prioritize X9. I mean, the Zero series really does not need a remake. Those games were pretty good enough as they were. I mean, 1 could definitely have some fine tuning, 1 and 2, but otherwise I wouldn't touch those. X9 has been long overdue. We need that already. What other platformers do you play, and what non-platformers do you really enjoy and would want to make a guide / challenge run of? Maybe the answer I gave for the other question earlier in the video may apply to the first part of the question, but in terms of like guides and stuff for other non-Mega Man games, that's just off the table, because I've been on this platform ever since 2009, and variety content just does not work. Like, the gaming space in general is just oversaturated. So, niching down like I did with the Mega Man series, that's just the best way a small channel can go, because even though a smaller part of your audience may love for you to branch off into like a completely different series like Castlevania or like Devil May Cry or any other game, that small part of your audience may enjoy it, but the vast majority, no matter what anyone says, they just won't be down for that sort of thing. That's the harsh reality of YouTube, and that's something that we as creators have to get acclimated to and adjust to. So if I were to do another project that's non-Mega Man related, that's just going to be off this channel. It's going to be its separate thing, because yeah, variety content just in 2023 just does not work unless you're just a massive 1 million subscriber channel, or your brand is just specifically variety gaming. And I don't mean to say this in a derogatory way or anything, but viewers have a lot of power. In fact, they have more power than the creators themselves, because your views dictate what we basically do. And yeah, and most people shy away from this because they don't want to admit how shallow it is, but most people watch a certain creator because of a certain type of content they produce. Like, for an example, I'm known far and wide at this point in the Mega Man community of being the Mega Man Zero guy. So anything that's like not Mega Man Zero related won't really do as well. I mean, nowadays it's kind of what and what, because I like spread my content wider. So I probably won't run into that particular problem, and I can get away with making just about any type of Mega Man video if I pull it off pretty well. I mean, I do the same thing. I mean, there's certain creators that I watch because of a certain type of content they make, and that doesn't mean I don't care for that creator. It's just that if there's a certain content that they're not pumping out and something pops up in my feed that doesn't really interest me, I'm just not going to watch it. And I'm pretty sure that there's plenty of people on my channel that does the same to me, and which I don't mind. That's just how YouTube works. If I'm not pumping out a Mega Man video, I'm pretty sure 90% of my audience won't watch it. Another problem that presents is that, say that I do this weird offbeat video, like a Castlevania video or something, and then I'm just bringing in like this whole new slew of different audiences, and it's like, well, now I have to keep track of the Castlevania community right on top of the Mega Man community. It's too much to juggle. Having to mingle with so many different communities on a single channel, that's chaotic. Plus, that Castlevania audience would want more from me, and I'm a Mega Man channel, so I wouldn't be able to provide more for them. And that's basically YouTube creation 101, and that's mainly why most people can't really succeed as a YouTuber, because they are not ready to come in with the right mindset. And I'm not saying that to be a successful YouTuber, you have to be like a people pleaser, and you have to be a slave to the algorithm and be a slave to your audience, which I am not saying that. I'm just saying that you have to make content you like and you also have to balance that out by giving your audience what they expect from you. Otherwise, you're just gonna be like millions of the other channels that's like stuck in limbo and they can't really go anywhere. And that's why people shy away from this subject so much, because the whole prospect of making money off of YouTube and all of that, there's a stigma around it that makes it seem like it's just a bad thing to make videos for the views. And it's like, there's nothing wrong with that. Like, this pressure that's going on to make people feel bad about chasing the views, like, it's only bad when people do it in bad faith, like clickbait titles and thumbnails and all that stuff, and clearly making content just for the buck. So me personally, I'm stuck in the middle. I would rather make things that I would like to make. That's why I don't really take requests, because I would rather have my freedom and make the content that I want, while also making sure that it's enjoyable for the people who watch me. But I've rambled on this for too long. Next question. What is your favorite fighting game out of the ones you've played? Tatsunoko vs. Capcom. Really, really underrated tag fighter. I put so many hours into that game back in like 2011. Between 2011 and 2014, I played the hell out of that game. And Marvel vs. Capcom 3 killed it because of the popularity. But yeah, I loved that game. I used to play with friends online all the damn time. I was pretty deep into the community. I even got really well to the point where if I would have just kept going, maybe I would have been like tournament level if I just kept at it. But the game scene just kind of died and it got boring because most people moved to Marvel 3 when that came out. So I would have loved to stick with Tatsunoko. I remember someone even recorded some sets that I did with them a long time ago. I still have that video bookmarked somewhere. Maybe I'll link it in the description or something, because I was surprised the guy had recorded our matches like that, because my team was like Chun-Li and Zero. Best Mega Man girl. Take a wild guess. No, but on a serious note, I don't necessarily have an opinion on the Mega Man girls. Gonna be completely frank here, a lot of them just doesn't have like a lot of personality going for them. The only one that really had some semblance of depth was Aliota, because she actually had some pretty deep backstory in X6, and it's kind of overlooked considering how infamous that game is. But just based off characterization alone, I'd probably go for Aliota. But if you want to be a bit more shallow, Layer. As for the other part of your question, SNES X by a mile. Which one do you prefer, X5 or X6? Can I say neither? Okay, well, if I was held at gunpoint and I had to choose one over the other, X6, it's a broken mess, but at least it's a fun broken mess. X5 just puts me to sleep. You ever thought about live streaming? Maybe your raw no damage attempts, or something more casual like Fire Emblem, even if it is just on your second channel. I've addressed this before. Not recently, maybe like a year or two ago, but my current living situation isn't ideal to live stream with. For one, I don't really have my own place yet. Compared to like that year or two that I brought it up, I'm definitely in a much better place to finally find that ideal place, so I won't be able to deal with distractions from my family and stuff like that. And another reason is because I work an evening shift job, and scheduling will be really tricky. I don't get home until like sometime after 11 p.m. and then I also just have to do other stuff before I get home. After I get home, and then yeah, it'll just be way too late to live stream. And then that just leaves weekends, which my weekends are usually some of my most productive times, so it just does not work. I can't really do it right now. I'd have to be in a completely different place in life before I could even consider live streaming on like a regular basis or something like that. How did you manage to view the hitbox data of the classic games for your anniversary collection video? Pure Sabe, the guy who made Rockman 4 Minus Infinity, he made a ROM hack for all 6 NES games where it showed all the hitbox data. Whenever I find that link, I'll just put it in the video description for you. If you had to choose between ice cream and cake, what would you choose? Cake. Bench press PR? Or what classic Mega Man game is your favorite and why? I've already answered the second question, but bench press PR? Well, I don't bench press. Actually, I don't really do weighted training at all. I'm mostly calisthenics bodyweight training. So calisthenics bodyweight training, that's like just your basic push-ups, diamond push-ups, like pull-ups, chin-ups, all that stuff. So I'm mainly using my body weight to train. And pretty sure I know why you answered that question, because of that thing there, but I barely even use that 30-pound dumbbell. It's mainly whenever I'm doing like squats, and I'll hold it like something like this, just to give you a visual example. It's like, yeah, like stuff like that. I do my normal dumbbell curls too and all that stuff, but for the most part, 99% of my training is all body weight. So I guess a more accurate thing to ask would be like how many, I don't know, push-ups I could do. So, I mean, that seems like to be the standard benchmark for like fitness, for body weight training, which to answer that, at the most, I can do about 201 push-ups. Not all at once, no, I definitely can't do that all at once. I divide it into sets like you're supposed to. As for how many I can do in succession, you know, without stopping, I don't know. But hey, if you want me to make a video of me doing 200 push-ups, get this video to 1,000 likes. Magnus, why do you look so much like my dad? Shit, I don't know. I can't control the way I look. Now go to bed, my child. Magnus, what is your favorite character that doesn't involve the Mega Man series? Ooh, here's another hard one. Not exactly sure how to answer that one, because my favorites have always fluctuated over the years between game series and anime and all of that. I mean, I love Virgil from Devil May Cry, Yusuke from Yu Yu Hakusho. Best anime, by the way. Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know, it's a good question, but I can't really decide. How many ATP does one molecule of glucose make in an anaerobic human cell? Boy, what? Worst design or just the one you hate the most? Normal enemy in the Mega Man Zero ZX series. What is the most things you hate in your life you can change, but you have no time to do so? Probably gonna have a bit of a weird and complicated answer here, so just bear with me. So, I mean, there's not a lot I could actually list. Just the one that pops out to me the most would be that I hate the fact that I have a practically non-existent social life. And it is something I can change, but it's just that the lifestyle that I live and the goals I have in mind and just basically everything about me. I mean, the fact that I'm suspected to be on the autism spectrum, that doesn't really make it any easier for me. I mean, I haven't ever gotten an official diagnosis, but I mean, I'm at the point in my life where I just don't really care to know like 100% sure, but I mean, all of the signs are there, so I really don't even need a diagnosis. But either way, social situations are tricky for me, especially with, you know, how my brain is wired much differently than your average person. So I can definitely take steps to improve my social life and my social skills, which on the latter, I've been forced to improve my social skills mainly because of the fact that I'm in the workforce, and those are essential skills I need just to basically function as a human being. But I do hate the fact that I'm pretty reclusive and I have a good deal of trust issues for good reason. But I'm not gonna use that as an excuse. Those are things I can work on, but I certainly don't have the time to do so. I mean, I have my hands full with more important things. And I'm not saying human relationships are unimportant. It's just, I don't know, I just prioritize myself now, because right now, at this point in my life, I'm the only person I can trust. So, yeah, we'll just leave it at that for now. Oh boy. Okay, next question. Where are you from? Because it's giving Chicago. Well, I'm not going to give out my exact state, but I am definitely not from Chicago. Are you Kira? Well, I can't exactly answer that question, because don't you think that's a bit inappropriate, making such assumptions like that, you know? Try not to ask questions that you might regret later on. But that's just my personal advice to you. So, if you don't mind, I've got something important to write down. And, in the meantime, I'm going to take some potato chips and eat it. Pineapple on pizza, yes or no? Hell no! I love me some veggie pizzas, but you can miss me with that fruit. Favorite Fire Emblem character? Fuck. Favorite Fire Emblem character? Oh man, let's see. Well, I think I'll just give one for a male character and one for a female character, and maybe some honorable mentions here or there. So for favorite male, man, it's hard to tell because there are so many good Fire Emblem characters, and Ike and Dimitri just kind of fight for that #1 spot for me. But I don't know, I would just say for now, Ike, and for female, that would be either Mercedes from Three Houses or Lynn from Blazing Sword. And I'm inclined to say Mercedes for now. I won't spend too much time on this, but as far as for Ike goes, he was such a good subversion on the usual noble lord trope that Fire Emblem liked to run with for pretty much all of its stories. And him growing up as a commoner, as a mercenary, and a no-nonsense mercenary at that. And the dude had so many funny lines because it was like dry humor with him. But he also had some really good character moments. And Mercedes is kind of like for a different reason. Yeah, that woman has a lot of depth to her backstory. And the fact that she's such a calm and composed person on the surface. She takes everything with a smile. Like that's like hella inspiring, you know? But yeah, as far as other honorable mentions go though, Zyark from the Tellius games, aka Ike's games. Of course, Dimitri. Micaiah from Radiant Dawn. And that's probably it for now. And the final question for today, how are you doing? I know that's a pretty simple question to pick, but there's a reason why I left it for last because, well, that ties into that final part of the video that I mentioned. Well, before we get into the deep shit, to address the Model PX thing, because that was asked about like 3 times, yeah, that's still going on. And I have come up with a solution because MetaX did give me some action replay codes that'll make that much more smoother. It's just a matter of me getting the time to actually work on it, you know, which we're going to get into that right now. So lately my personal life has been interfering with this channel, and because of that, that just leaves me feeling mentally drained and I don't really feel like producing as much videos. That's why whenever I was doing stuff like those 2 review videos, if you can call it that, while those were a lot of work, they also didn't really take a lot of mental energy. So doing content like that and the ultimate disrespect and all of that stuff, it's really just frankly filler content until I can feel more energized to get back to the main projects. Because I have to admit, I've been getting thrown into the ringer with, you know, real life and my aspirations and, you know, all of that other stuff. So I've been finding myself casually gaming more and hyper-focusing on my writing and reading and all of that, because I did tell myself that I really want to finally make some significant progress on my book. And I have definitely not been balancing my time between my writing, YouTube, and my personal life. So I've been making a conscious effort to balance that out. So that meant that I had to take a sacrifice and just reduce the amount of time that I devoted to videos so I can allocate that time more to my writing. And I can also allocate some more of my free time to just relaxing. Like I said, I've been casually gaming more, and I feel like that's been very therapeutic. So I fixed my sleep schedule, or more accurately, my schedule in general, so I can have some more organization in my life, you know, be able to pursue my goals in a more healthy manner. Because the way that I have it set up now is that I wake up 2 hours before work, and I dedicate that mainly just to wake myself up and then spend some time writing before I have to get ready for work. And then when I get home, then I can maybe like spend an hour or 2 on videos, and then after that I can just relax. I'll spend those last 2 hours awake, and then there we go. Go to sleep, rinse and repeat. And that's been working out pretty well for me. Then the weekend rolls around, and then that's basically me just freestyling at that point. I can allocate my time throughout all of the tasks in their relaxing time and all the writing and stuff like that much better because I have much more time to utilize. So what does this have to do with the PX run and all of that stuff? Well, it's basically all you need to know why it's taking so long. Because yeah, I simply just don't work on videos as long as I used to anymore. And I feel like that's fine. And all I have to do is just ask you to be patient with me. Like, the video production is going to be much slower from here on out. And that's basically a habit that I'm going to have to employ. Like, I know previously I was doing something like a video a week, but now I'm probably going to cut that down to like a video per 2 or 3 weeks or something like that. Or maybe in some cases a video a month. And as far as like the runs like Model PX, that means that when it comes to actually recording the gameplay, that time is also reduced. So, for example, after I finish the final stage, I mentioned this in the PX video, I'm kind of doing it in an inverted order. I'm going to do the final stage first, and then I'm going to actually start the run, which I had already did that. I had got all the way up to purple, but I just didn't like how the recordings were going at that point, and I just kind of scrapped it all, and I'm just going to do it all from scratch again. So yeah, at that point, it's a lot more easier for me to just pump out more, less mentally demanding projects, regardless of how much they require more research and gathering footage and all of that stuff. But all of that is good filler. And then that also leads me into my final point, because after this, I'm just going to end the video. I'm actually just much more interested at the moment in diving back into my tactical RPGs like Fire Emblem and Shining Force, and, you know, doing stuff for that on the Cronwell channel, because I can actually feel a lot of inspiration for that. But I also feel like the Magnus Zero channel just kind of prohibits me from focusing on that, just because this is the main channel. But I came to the conclusion that before I could burn myself out, I just need to make sure that I hold the brakes on it and then just slow down the production so I can actually pursue those ideas I have for my other channel. Because I love my strategy RPGs almost as much as I love Mega Man. So being able to slow down the production on Magnus Zero so Magnus Cronwell can have a bit of some spotlight and I can build that channel up some more, because that's why I don't even advertise it on this channel as much, because I'm not trying to mix my audience like that. Because Fire Emblem and Mega Man fans are like two different factions. So yeah, I'm a part of both communities, and both of the channels are like representative of that, because I want to keep my Mega Man stuff here and I want to keep my Fire Emblem stuff over there. And that leads into a nice segue into giving myself an extended break from Mega Man, because that'll allow me to come back to it fully invigorated after I get all the Fire Emblem out of my system. Now granted, I will definitely be going in somewhat hard on Battle Network content whenever the collection drops. So yeah, I'm really excited for April, especially since that's also around the time where I'll be taking a vacation from my job. And while it sounds like double work to be making content for 2 channels, it really isn't. Because, like I said, I'm devoting 1 to 2 hours per night on the weekdays to video. So, maybe one day I'm in a Fire Emblem mood. That means I'm just going to work on a Fire Emblem video for maybe that week. And then the next week, I'm like, oh, I'm in a Mega Man mood, so I'm just going to make a Mega Man video. And I also just need to pick my Fire Emblem channel off the ground, because now that I've got a lot of experience under my belt with YouTube, I know how the algorithm works. I know what gets views. I know what type of titles and thumbnails to make. So I'm pretty confident that I can build a sizable Fire Emblem channel if I actually put effort into it. Well, Fire Emblem / Shining Force / tactical RPG, whatever you want to call it. So that's why I need a break from Mega Man, so I can actually lift that channel up and just get it a nice kickstart. Because lately on that channel, I've mostly just been doing Fire Emblem Heroes content, and that gets stale after a while. So I really want to dive into the actual mainline games and actually do some elaborate projects with it. But yeah, long story short, all of my plans with this channel, they aren't going anywhere. So yeah, thanks for watching. And thanks for submitting your questions. That really meant a lot to me, because I did have fun answering your questions. And like I said, I'm sorry for those who I didn't get to. So maybe like tomorrow or just throughout the week, I'll be going back into that community post and I'll just go and respond to all the comments that I just did not feature in this video, minus the comments that were basically asking the same thing. But yeah, that's it for me. Stay chill, y'all.